We got partnering with charter schools. Consider building a new middle school in Riverstone. Consider the intersection of LJ Parkway and University, or 6 and University. Other ideas, it's time for the district to consider voucher programs to give parents different options other than overcrowded campuses or underperforming schools. Again, we're sharing all feedback. Expand the GT Academy at Quail Valley, 300 students per class to help utilization of that facility. Keep Riverstone zoned to Fort Settlement by moving Colony Meadows to First Colony, currently not completely utilized. Feed Riverstone middle school students into the new Sienna Middle School instead of Quail Valley for safety and proximity. Build a new middle school, getting the majority of students from First Colony and Fort Settlement. Utilize commercial lots for sale at LJ Parkway and University, maybe Kroger. Consider rezoning all Riverstone students to Elkins. Consider zoning Telfair to Satartia. Again, Telfair already goes to Satartia, and Kempner to have more capacity for families around Riverstone to relieve Clements. Again, we don't have an overutilization problem at Clements and accommodate students at Riverstone. Other feedback that we have here, again, considering a new middle school near Elkins, consider building a middle school for Riverstone. Make Quail Valley a standalone GT Academy to relieve overutilization of the middle schools, and that could involve, again, making Quail Valley that dedicated facility. Maybe Lake Olympia takes the Quail Valley Lantern Lane enrollment, and then maybe there's a new middle school for the HIGHTOWER feeder pattern in there. That's another option to do it. Close Lake Olympia Middle School and transfer all students to Quail Valley. Move the eastern part of Riverstone to Lake Olympia. Consider zoning all students in Riverstone to the same high school, Elkins High School. Create attractive programming at Elkins to attract students from other feeder patterns. Use the administration annex as a GT Academy, freeing up space at Quail Valley for zoning. Okay, moving on to HIGHTOWER. Utilization at Burton is projected to remain under 80%. Utilization at Parks is projected to exceed 120%. And again, that's because of the growth that we have in this area here. Utilization at HIGHTOWER is projected to be below 80%, but let's be mindful of the academy program that we currently have at HIGHTOWER. Again, this 80% does not show, does include academy enrollment. This 77% does not. And so if those academy programs are maintained at HIGHTOWER, perhaps that's going to be closer to 85 or 90%. Also, we need to consider that HIGHTOWER doesn't have a middle school within its boundary, and so the middle school that serves all of HIGHTOWER is Lake Olympia right here. And also that Palmer does split between HIGHTOWER and Elkins at the high school level. Our first option in this area, construct a new elementary school to relieve Parks in the Lake Olympia, Fort Bend Toll Road corridor right here. And then perform life cycle replacements in other facilities as needed. Other considerations, again, we just got back from Elkins, so this new school could also provide relief for Palmer and the Elkins feeder pattern. Parking lot ideas that we got here, again, consider addressing the Lake Olympia Parkway, the growth in this area with additions at both Parks and Palmer instead of new construction. There's our Lake Olympia as an early college idea again. Now we're starting to get into some high school ideas a little bit. Combine Willow Ridge and Marshall and move Ridge Point to HIGHTOWER. Make Ridge Point High School an academy. Rezone to send Baines and Sienna Crossing into HIGHTOWER. Rezone within our current neighborhoods. Allow all addresses north of Steep Bank Trace and Sienna to attend HIGHTOWER to relieve Ridge Point. Build a middle school in this area. Have current 7th graders go to Thornton. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail here. We've got an option in Ridge Point that may have some of the area at HIGHTOWER in play. Other feedback here, keep all children at HIGHTOWER and zone all children to their home school. Zone Ridge Point students to HIGHTOWER again. Consider again building a new elementary and middle school for the HIGHTOWER feeder pattern. This is a new one that came up. Consider rezoning Shadow Creek Ranch area to HIGHTOWER. Moving on to Kempner. Lakeview has also one of those highest FCIs within FBISD. It also has an expansive attendance zone that extends west all the way to 1464. We also kind of need to be cognizant of the condition at both Sugar Mill and Town West. They have some pretty high FCIs as well. So the first option in this area is to close and repurpose Sugar Mill and repurpose for district use. And again, that could serve as a swing facility for other renovation projects that are ongoing. Consider a rezoning process to align Lakeview students residing in the Austin feeder pattern with those Austin schools. And so, again, that idea is that once we have the capacity for Elementary 51 online, we may be able to serve these students in some of the schools in that feeder pattern, reducing the burden on Lakeview and Sugar Mill. Consider rezoning Barrington Place students within Kempner into the feeder pattern into either Lakeview or Town West. And then perform life cycle and renovation placements on the other facilities as needed. Just to keep in mind, again, this is 310 students that are within the Austin feeder pattern that are currently at Lakeview. Our next option here, this is kind of a little switch. This is close and repurpose Lakeview for district use or some other program. Perform a major renovation at Sugar Mill. Consider a rezoning process, again, to align the Lakeview students that are west and in the Austin feeder pattern with those Austin schools. Consider these Barrington Place students when we're designing the school and looking at the boundary for this area as well. And again, consider that the majority of the Lakeview students are coming from the Austin feeder pattern. We've got a lot of parking lot ideas in this area. Consider building an addition on Town West, and then whether it's renovating Sugar Mill or rebuilding Lakeview, consider making those schools large enough to accommodate all the students in this Barrington Place feeder pattern. This is an option that kind of works in tandem with one of those Meadows ideas, which was, hey, let's look at making Meadows large enough to accommodate this portion of Barrington Place. And so what we could theoretically have here is if we had 750 or 800 students in Lakeview or Sugar Mill, depending on which option kind of moves forward, and then 750 or 800 students at Town West, and then 750 or 800 at Barrington Place, we can serve all the students within this area within 3 schools instead of 5. And so that was just an idea that kind of came out there. Again, more ideas of aligning Telfair back to Kempner to relieve Clements. Let me get through this, and I just want to reiterate that we don't have an overutilization issue at Clements. Consider Lakeview as a site for an early childhood center. This is another one. Consider renovating Lakeview and Sugar Mill and keeping both schools open. Excuse me. Let's be courteous to everybody and it's trying to hear the presentation. So something like this could be a K1 or a K2, 3, 5 brother-sister school tandem to maybe enhance some of the program offerings at those schools. But that's just an idea that we got. Utilize Lakeview and or Sugar Mill as swing space for Meadows and keep the school culture together during rebuild. During the rebuild of Meadows, consider MR Wood as a swing facility, and I believe that's within the Kempner feeder pattern. Take Belcamp, Brookside, Venetian Estates from Highlands and send them to Kempner to relieve overcrowding at Dulles. Again, we don't have overcrowding at Dulles. Consider making Lakeview an early childhood center. If Lakeview or Sugar Mill consolidates, use the remaining school as swing space for Meadows while it's built, and so lots of feedback on that. Create a GT program at Lakeview to feed into Kempner and Austin. Create a bilingual program at Lakeview. Consider making Lakeview a pre-K center or admin or an extended day annex. Consider renting out Lakeview to the city of Sugar Land as a historical site. Consider making Lakeview a magnet for the arts, gifted or bilingual program. Consider rezoning students from Drawback to Lakeview. Consider making Lakeview an FBISD Kids Hall of Fame, all kinds of ideas. Consider making grade configuration changes. This is what we talked about in a couple slides ago. Consider making grade configuration changes to Sugar Mill and Lakeview to balance enrollment. Okay, moving on to Marshall. The overall utilization at the elementary schools that serve Marshall is projected to go from 71 to 63%. Missouri City Middle School is currently underutilized and is under 80%. Under 80% utilization and in good physical condition. Marshall High School is currently utilized under 55% and is in good physical condition. So our option for this feeder pattern, we're looking at closing and repurposing Hunter's Glen for some kind of district use. We perform life cycle and renovation of placements on other facilities based on needs. And so one consideration in this, between those 4 schools, Armstrong, Glover, Hunter's Glen, and Jones, we've got an excess of over 1,100 seats. And so all those students could be served within those remaining 3 schools. Okay, please let me get through this. Please be courteous to others, and let's save our conversation for when we get out into the auditorium, into the commons. We didn't have any parking lot ideas after the board meeting, but we got a whole lot of feedback from Marshall after our meeting at Marshall. So consider adding the academy programs, maybe all of them to Marshall, and then keep the existing boundary. A lot of these are going to be related to increasing utilization at Marshall, because that's what we need to do. Consider zoning half of Quail Valley to Marshall and half going to Elkins. Consider zoning Ridgepoint students to Marshall. Consider adding a CTE or vocational component to Marshall. Consider rezoning to increase attendance. Use the funds for Ridgepoint 9th grade center to make Marshall more attractive academically. If Marshall becomes an early college, please keep fine arts. Bus students from overpopulated schools such as Clements. Again, Clements is not overutilized. Consider making Progressive High School the main academy hub. Rezone areas north of 6th to Marshall. Again, that's kind of that Marshall-Elkins move. Close Glover and utilize this space for administrative purposes. Develop programs such as academies, medical media within the school to implement preemptively at elementary and middle school to feed those programs. Tackle elementary students or those issues of literacy and advocacy programs that monitor and track their success. Rezone neighborhoods close to Marshall from Elkins. Consider socioeconomic status when rezoning. Just don't move students from one school to another without offering a better school. Bring business opportunities to the area for it to thrive. CTE academies can equal success. Equity is key. If a high school campus loses its community and students are bused, we should have at least one east side and one west side school if we're going to have those dedicated academy high schools. Again, zone nearby subdivisions to Marshall and Missouri City. Why are these neighborhoods going to Elkins? Bring overflow students to Marshall so it can stay open. Have academy programs, again, return to Marshall. Zoning should be done if it will resolve the lower student population. The school is an integral part of the community, and any other option will further divide or devalue the community. Institute a law academy after the school's namesake to attract students district-wide to help increase enrollment. Build partnerships with HCC down the street to build and maybe create a GT academy at Marshall. Send overflow of Ridgepoint students to Marshall and Willow Ridge. Bring Briargate and or Blue Ridge into the feeder pattern to increase enrollment numbers. Renovate Hunters Glen section by section. Build a new facility on or adjacent to the same site at Hunters Glen. Again, I just want to kind of talk about this here. The driving force for the repurposing of Hunters Glen is utilization, not necessarily the condition of the facility. Establish Hunters Glen as a pre-K facility for the Marshall feeder pattern. Make Marshall the only school that has advanced programs like robotics or technical schools that can allow students to graduate with a trade or certificate. Programs like oil drilling, pipeline, LVN. Communicate with HCC to transition some of their certification programs to Marshall. Provide courses that when students graduate, they have a trade under their belt and can pay their way through college. Do a dedication ceremony and talk about all the positive contributions that Marshall alumni have made, like a Wall of Fame. Looking at Missouri City, bring something back. Bring kids from Quail Valley Middle School that used to go to Missouri, bring them back into Missouri City. Turn Quail Valley into a special needs middle school. There's some solutions here that talk about maybe some special ed programs at these schools to fill a need. Build the annex for technical education. I think that's talking about the annex down there by within the Clements feeder pattern. Consider that as a technical education academy for middle school students that's kind of centrally located within the district. Add Quail Valley to the Marshall feeder pattern. Start specialized programs in the elementary or middle school and have them feed into Marshall to continue that program. Have Hunters Glen use that as a facility to kind of absorb Blue Ridge. Okay, moving on to Ridgepoint. Utilization at Ridgepoint High School is projected to exceed 120% utilization. Utilization at Leonetti and Sienna Crossing are kind of in the same boat. Heritage Rose is projected to stay below 120% over the next 5 years, but then increase over 120% in years 6 to 10. And then we also have to know that we do have additional growth in this area beyond the 10-year planning horizon. Our first option in this area talks about elementary schools. Our solution is to build one middle school kind of in that Texas 6 corridor up here to relieve Sienna Crossing and that area up here. The other one would be kind of south on the 521 corridor, not Lake Olympia, but Sienna Parkway. That brings our overall utilization among the elementary schools in this area to 82%. We had a lot of feedback about, well, why don't we just put additions on Schiff, Sienna Crossing, and Scanlon Oaks? Well, we just did that. And so all three of those elementary schools are around 1,000 students. Looking at middle school, this is kind of our first, middle school and high schools, this is our first option here. This is a grade configuration change, so this is one of those programmatic options. And so the idea here is that we would convert Baines into a 6-7 building, Thornton would be an 8-9 building, and then Ridgepoint would be 10-12. And so we would reduce overutilization at Ridgepoint by moving ninth grade into the middle school facilities. Some considerations here, Thornton would have to be reconfigured within its existing footprint to increase capacity. It currently has a square footage that's larger than Baines, but it has some kind of next generation spaces that are there to enhance the program. We just know that we'd have to kind of reprogram to bring that capacity up because by shifting ninth grade out of Ridge Point and into Thornton, we could be looking at overutilization at Thornton. And so looking at that reprogramming in conjunction with the use of portable classrooms to kind of balance that utilization. This is kind of a stopgap option. This keeps our overall overutilization at Ridge Point under 120% until 2023-24. I'll talk about this here in a couple minutes when we get to the parking lot ideas. Our next option for to kind of relieve Ridge Point High School is consider building a ninth grade center, or considering building a ninth grade center. And so this would be for 1,000 students somewhere in this area. Again, our high school enrollment is projected to reach 4,000 within the next 10 years just at Ridge Point. The total capacity of Ridge Point plus the ninth grade center would be around 3,500 students. And so that gets us kind of part of the way there. Some parking lot ideas we have here. The first one's kind of a question. If building a ninth grade center is not an option, would you rather see a rezoning process to distribute Ridge Point students to other schools? Or would you rather see a programmatic shift to keep students within the feeder pattern? Something like a split shift where we'd have half the students going to school in the AM and half the students going to the school in the PM. This would really function like two schools. We'd have to have two separate staffs and everything. We're not expecting teachers to work double shifts in a situation like that. This is a little bit more information on that grade configuration change. There's concern about, hey, if we do a grade configuration change and it's too late to implement it for next year because it's April already. What if we open Thornton as an 8th and 9th grade building only? That way we wouldn't possibly have a student starting at Thornton in 6th grade, going to Baines for 7th grade, and then back to Thornton for 8th grade. And so that's just an idea about that to make that a little bit more feasible. Other ideas, consider HCC as a 9th grade center. It may require some kind of lease. Relieve overcrowding by rezoning Baines and Sienna Crossing into Hightower High School. Rezone students to other schools to balance enrollment. One idea was to maybe look at using Goodman as some kind of relief for Ridge Point. Option 2 keeps early college academies more centralized for students, and so that's referring to one of our options to repurpose Marshall as a dedicated early college high school. Consider virtual learning for students that have interest in academies who don't have transportation access. Consider sending overflow to Marshall and Kempner. Consider having students, so this is a new one from last night, consider having students maybe take 1 or 2 of their courses from home online to relieve the number of students that are there throughout the day. Consider changing grade configurations throughout the feeder pattern to deal with other utilization issues. And so at the elementary level, maybe we look at, hey, maybe we convert some of those elementary schools to K4 to relieve some of that overcrowding and not have to rezone as much. Consider moving 5th grade into middle schools to balance enrollment. Again, use HCC near the Sienna Library for 6th grade, Baines for 7th and 8th, and Thornton for 9th grade. That's a new one as well. Moving on to Travis. Due to current overutilization at Madden, current new 1st through 5th graders are enrolling or being overflowed into Oyster Creek. We talked about that earlier. Elementary 51 is planned to open in the fall of 2019, but will not have enough capacity to address all the overutilization. See the Austin feeder pattern, we talked about that a little bit before. Adjacent elementary schools in Bush and Austin have some excess capacities. Our first option for this one is, hey, let's look at building a campus addition on Neal. The core of Neal was designed for 1,000 students. Let's just look at building an addition because we know that we're not going to get much relief at Neal from elementary 51. Also look at rebalancing enrollment between some of the schools and the other feeder patterns. Some ideas that we got, consider building an addition on Oakland. Consider aligning the Madden feeder pattern with the Austin High School feeder pattern. And so that was that Madden, Garcia, Travis split that we were talking about earlier. Consider building elementary 51 large enough to accommodate all of Aliana within Madden. Consider additional schools in the area beyond 51. If Madden is going to go to Travis, it should feed to Bowie and not Garcia. Build a 2-story addition. Please let me get through this. Consider building a 2-story addition on Madden to, again, boost utilization in that area. Consider rezoning all non-Aliana residents out of Madden. Consider using the out-of-business Gander Mountain as a facility to relieve Satartia and Clements. Consider using University of Houston Fort Bend to relieve Clements and Fort Settlement. Consider moving Aliana students back to Bowie since they'll go to Travis. Again, these issues we talked about. Okay, Willow Ridge. Excuse me, I have one more feeder pattern to go through, so let's just be courteous of all of our parents here. Utilization at three of the 4 area elementary schools is projected to decline below 80%. Blue Ridge, Briargate, and Ridgemont all have FCIs that exceed 50%. McAuliffe is projected to remain underutilized. Willow Ridge is projected to remain underutilized. So our first option here, we do a major renovation at Ridgemont to create a PK through 1 building to focus on early literacy. We would look at building a brand new 1,200 student station 2 through 5 building on the Shadow Creek Ranch site, and we would close and repurpose Blue Ridge, Briargate, and Ridgegate. And so one of the ideas here is that we'd have all the students in the feeder pattern in the same building by grade. And so there'd be opportunities for specialized curriculum, team teaching, and those types of things by having all the students in the same grade in the same building. Other option for this area, consider major renovations at Briargate, Ridgegate, and Ridgemont, close and repurpose Blue Ridge. All of the elementary facilities in this area are in fair to poor condition. And then in this option, we had some flexible grade configurations between those 3 schools. And one of those could be a K1 building that focuses on early literacy and then feeds into the other 2. Parking lot ideas, we didn't receive any until we got to Marshall. Rezone to balanced attendance. Convert Willow Ridge into an early college campus. Rezone all students to Marshall. Consider combining Willow Ridge and Marshall with current feeder middle schools, and then maybe convert Marshall into the magnet school. Consider leaving the bilingual program at Blue Ridge. Close Blue Ridge and send students to Ridgegate. This is another one of those options that kind of focuses on special ed and needs for those students. Rebuild Blue Ridge and open it to the community. Renovate building a section at a time, and then build the new building on site, kind of that swing on site issue. Consider making Willow Ridge a middle school and rezone accordingly. Create a dedicated school or a school within a school to house education programs at underutilized schools at Blue Ridge. Okay, that's all of our feeder patterns, and now I'm going to go through kind of some big picture high school ideas that we have here. So this is our high school utilization map, and I kind of want to reiterate that most of the schools on this side of the district are in good shape as far as utilization goes. Kind of our overarching issues at high school are the imbalance of enrollment between Marshall, Willow Ridge, Hightower, and Ridge Point. Overall, the district-wide high school enrollment is projected to increase by over 1,200 students over the next 5 years, and 764 of those students are projected at Ridge Point High School. And so that's kind of our major issue at the high school level. Our first option for high schools is to consider kind of a rather Herculean rezoning effort to kind of shift enrollment from Ridge Point through Hightower to Willow Ridge to Marshall. All 3 of those schools would be needed to relieve that overutilization. Some of the other ideas that we'll talk about, when we get to those parking lot ideas, are to consider, hey, what if we include Elkins in this conversation kind of as a domino effect, where you look at maybe rezoning some of the area that's north of 6 and Elkins to either Hightower or Willow Ridge, and then backfill Elkins with maybe part of Ridge Point. And so that was another idea that kind of came out. Our next option for this is converting Marshall High School into a dedicated early college or maybe an academy high school where we have all the academy programs at Marshall. We'd have to rezone to put the students, that boundary to the other schools because Marshall would no longer have a boundary. I think it's important to consider that this action alone is likely not enough to completely relieve Ridge Point. And so this is something that could kind of help overutilization at some of the other schools if they kind of creep up in that direction. Option 3, convert Hightower High School into a dedicated early college high school, which would replace all academy programs that are distributed among all high schools, or some kind of dual credit program, just like we would have in the previous option at Marshall. Again, we'd have to rebalance to balance enrollment because Hightower would no longer have a boundary. And again, I want to reiterate that this option alone is likely not enough to completely relieve Ridge Point. Some other ideas that we had here, consider virtual or distance learning for students that have an interest in academies that don't have access. create a dedicated middle school for Hightower. We've talked about that as we were going through the feeder pattern issues. And one thing that was very prevalent, when we have any changes kind of recommended or as options at the high school level, consider kind of phasing those in and allowing at the freshman class so that students that are already in a school can kind of finish out at their existing school. Another feedback that we got last time, offer classes to address overutilized, or online classes to address overutilized high school. And so the idea there is that, some of the curriculum could be taken at home online to reduce the load on the physical facilities at Ridgepoint. We also had a chance to engage with a student group. We actually, I actually took the presentation through the Student Voices group, which is a body of 33 high school students. There's 3 representatives from each high school, and they had a chance to kind of share their feedback. And I wanted to kind of go through all the feedback that the actual students came up with, because a lot of people ask, hey, we have all these parents here giving us their feedback. What do the students think? And so this is the feedback that we got from the students. Rezone all of New Territory to Austin, rezone a portion of Elkins to Marshall, then rezone some Ridgepoint to Elkins, move Elkins zoning towards Marshall, rezone part of so this is referring to the map, rezone part of the upper left corner of Ridgepoint to Elkins and Hightower, make Marshall an early college school and move Willow Ridge kids to Hightower, zone new neighborhood kids around Ridgepoint to Marshall, domino effect from Ridgepoint to Marshall, so that kind of that idea that we talked about earlier, set up new academies that would attract students in need of student growth, such as Marshall. And so new academy programs. Start rezoning from west and south sides of Fort Bend school zones, relieving pressure from eastern zones. Tear down and repurpose Lakeview, renovate Sugar Mill and adjust Lakeview's feeder pattern, move the people who are on the corners of the zone to different schools, move Math and Science Academy to Marshall, rezone Dulles into Elkins, and rezone Elkins into Ridgepoint. Build a middle school for Hightower, for which it is solely zoned there. Add new programs to Marshall and move some of Elkins to Marshall and Ridgepoint to Hightower. Build another high school in the Ridgepoint High School school zone. The neighborhoods close to Elkins that are zoned to Ridgepoint should be rezoned, or that are close to Ridgepoint should be rezoned. Move Ridgepoint and Elkins students to Hightower, move the medical academy to Willow Ridge High. 3 academies that are moved into Marshall, 3 should be moved into Dulles, part of Dulles should be rezoned to Kempner. Rezone a portion of Elkins north of 6 to Willow Ridge and Marshall, and then distribute a portion of Ridgepoint to Elkins and Hightower. Try to make Willow Ridge and Marshall 6A. I'm assuming that has something to do with high school sports. I'm just from Ohio. Add academies. Revive and acknowledge why Willow Ridge and Marshall are underutilized. Combine Willow Ridge and Marshall and keep the extra building there used as a tech ed center until the population grows. Use the money to build a new high school in Commonwealth or Ridgepoint area. Make a GT high school or an early college prep high school. Do not make 9th grade center or split grades. And so, again, this is feedback that is from the students. And as I was going through this, what was kind of interesting to me is that I saw the word rezone mentioned quite a bit, coming from the actual students. Okay, so at this point, that finishes the presentation of all the options. I want to thank you for being very patient. This is turning into a very lengthy presentation. As you know, I'm sure many of you have already filled out. The online survey is available. The survey allows you to provide feedback on one or as many feeder pattern options as you want. Please continue to give us those parking lot ideas, but also just to save us some typing later, if you already see the idea up there, you don't need to put it up there again. But if you really need something to do and you want to write, go for it. And again, if you have any questions, you can ask the steering committee members out there that have the tags on like I do, and I'll be out there as well, and we'll be able to kind of take you through this. And I'm going to hand it back over to Beth before we retreat into the comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. A couple of really important pieces of information to remember. One of the things that Scott just said is if you see an item or an idea already listed, you don't need to list it again. And I want to confirm that and affirm that, because any piece of information we receive is given equal review from within the process and to the steering committee. So we could receive 1,500 of the same comment or one, and they're both valuable. So please know that. It's really getting that feedback that is new and different, and generating ideas that may be different from the ones that are out there. And then I wanted to fill you in on the very next steps in the process. And it's going to look a little different on our webpage moving forward, because after tonight's meeting, we'll update the presentation to reflect what you saw this evening, and we'll post this evening's video so that it is the most comprehensive. But then we want to post another video that shows all of the ideas that are captured from this evening as well. So please share that information with your friends and neighbors, so that those who were not able to attend any of these 4 meetings, or those who have reflected and have additional ideas to add, can log on and watch that final video. I ask you to give us a day or so to get that put together and synthesize all the ideas and get that posted. And then we'll leave an online survey open for a few days so that people can continue to engage. And I encourage you to do that as well. After you kind of have time to reflect and marinate on some things, you may come up with alternate solutions or ideas that you're more than welcome to log on and share again. But again, one piece of feedback is as valuable as 200 pieces of feedback saying the same thing. Every single item is reviewed, every item is put together and will be shared with the steering committee, and then moving forward, they'll begin their work in reviewing and drafting the recommendations that will be presented to the board for consideration during the May board cycle. So I welcome you into the cafeteria, where we're there to answer questions and help guide you through the process of providing feedback. Again, thank you very much for engaging in this very important work.